Hey there. I'm starting a project called 30 Days in 30 Minutes. And what I'm going to be doing is sharing 1 minute of each day for 30 days where I'm going to be talking about an activity or sharing or showing what is going on in my classroom on that activity, and then my reflection or debrief after. That'll be only 1 minute. I'll do all that for 30 days in a row. And what I'm going to do is reporting to you, and why reporting to you is a big deal for me is because I think that will motivate me to do great things and motivate me to always keep the students focused and motivate me to keep the students learning at the forefront. And by sharing, I hope that you'll see a little bit of your own classroom in my classroom and realize that we're all doing great things for our students to learn better, deeper, and fuel their sense making. We want to make sure that this is happening for our students. So I hope you watch and I hope you check in with me now and then, and take care.
Hey, so I just finished my first day of second semester. It was long. It's sometimes that first day goes and you meet your kids for the first time, and a lot of them have different issues they're bringing into the room, and I love to get that out into the open on the first day. So what we always talk about is kind of 4 big things that I stress. Curiosity, being challenged, working together. We talk about why those are all important. To get some of those background knowledge out into the open for me to think about, and it's kind of break down some of those barriers going forward into the semester. I asked my students to complete the phrase "math is like," and that kind of starts to kind of get a sense of where they're coming from when they think about math class and what their experiences are. So look at this student has said, let's see if we can get it in here. Math is like a long ride in a car. You can be happy to go, but you can get bored and tired. Or this other student wrote, math is like waves because some of it can pull me in with interest and some can push me away. Lots of interest. It sparks a lot of good discussion in class. Finally, what we end with is we play the game of NIM, whereas I put $20 down on the table and say, if anyone can beat me in this game, then you're going to get the $20. Now, nobody ends up beating me because the game of NIM has a winning strategy, but I set the kids off to play each other so that they can also discover that winning strategy and walk out the door with that strategy to go home and play mom or dad. And it's a nice kind of entry into working with each other at the whiteboards to learn that strategy, and a good entry into class. So we did that for 2 of the classes. And I'm teaching computer science, so that's a whole other ballgame, but that was day 1. Take care. Hey there, today was a beauty of a second day. The kids came in, we had their routines going, we've got their markers in their hands, their erasers, their calculators ready to go. We did some warm-up activities to start, and then we talked about the power of estimation and the power of mathematics and how we can narrow the estimations down by having more information and using that information with strategies. We did that through the R2D2 post-it note problem. You can see that there. You can also see that up in the wall in the classroom. And students had to notice and wonder and came up with some beauty notice and wonders. One of the big ones right off the bat was how many sticky notes cover that board, or why did you do this? And I love the why we do this question. It brings out the ideas, and kids get to answer that question at the end. Like students of mine were saying, because we could do math with it. So that was a quick 1 minute from second day. What was going on in your day? We are here on a snow bus day. There are no buses, and there are 2 classes in the room right now. And you can only see there's only 8 students, but they are working hard at solving math, yes, and these open middle type problem where they are reasoning through an order of operations problem to find the largest number, and then we're going to change it to find the smallest number. Now, do you want a big number right there?
I do.
Okay.
Which is the second highest we can get besides 9, but we use that for exponent. So that's what we can do if you guys want to do that. Yeah?
Well, because you want to divide a higher number to a smaller number to make your number not as...
Gotcha. So here's a question I'm going to leave you with, is the denominator right now, is that the smallest you could make?
No.
Hey there, day 4.
I started today with a problem on the Guatemalan sinkhole, which I believe I first learned from Robert Kaplinski, where we looked at a sinkhole and what I did is I extended it and showed a bigger sinkhole in a different place, and we talked about things we noticed and things we wondered, and came up with this idea of how many times bigger is the one sinkhole versus the other, which allows us to get into talking about areas of circles and doing some comparisons. So you're seeing some work behind me on all that. Then from that problem, we have slips on the desks where students will come up, pick one, go back, work on some area calculations to do some practice. What I find was that I'm running around checking these. I want to see and get that feedback to them. So I'm running around checking all these. And some kids are waiting with their hands up. So I want to find a better way to get those checks out to them. Sometimes what I have is I post the answers up on the board, but I want to see them. So I find like I'm running around kind of like almost with my head cut off too much, and I want to fix that. So any suggestions, throw them my way. Hey there. So on Fridays, I like to play a game just after we do our initial warm-up, which is 20 questions. And I usually choose objects from around the room, some mathematical, some not. Students have 20 questions to try to figure out what I've chosen by asking yes or no questions. I find this is a great way to build that inclusive culture in our room. Have a listen. Is it above my head? Yes. Yes? It's above my head?
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. Could I take it off the wall?
yes.
Okay. Is it made of paper?
No, it's not.
It's not made of paper?
It's not made of paper.
Okay. Is it technical?
Okay, next one is,
Writing. No writing.
okay, it's like 2.5.
Only words by Mariah.
Good.
It's like 2.5.
Over 2, down 4. So it should be past 2 by 2. You should be basically like, you should be 2 up.
To erase that.
2 up from that.
Yeah.
You go over 2, down 4.
Wait, you mean, no, I messed up.
Okay, and then
On the x-axis.
Over 2, down 4.
This one is first. They have 2 under it. You see the button. Yeah, so it's on it. Up is 8, right? The third one. The up is 8.
I'm the top.
Here's a quick update. Got to school today. Schools are closed. They closed the schools just as I was walking in the door. So as day 7 comes, I'm heading home. Hopefully you drive safe if you are also in some treacherous weather. Take care. Hey there, kids just left. We were working around the room on linear patterning here today. But one activity that I really love about using at the boards is I have them design their own linear pattern that doesn't go up by increments that are like perfect, like 1, 2, 3. Have changing incremental values for linear patterns, and then they have to create their equations and their tables. But then I have them erase all of that and keep the pattern there. And then now around the room we have almost like a gallery walk of linear kind of patterns that everybody can then go to a new board and look at how to calculate or generate the equation to match that. So we almost have like this now worksheet around the room, this practice set that they all created themselves. I love that that task, that little slight modification around the room.
36.
Yeah, so it'd be 3n plus 1.
Yeah, 3n plus 1.
Hey there, I'm not in my classroom today. I'm at a PD session with 2 different schools, my school and another school, and we are focusing on how to make better problem solvers. We are looking at a little bit of thinking classroom strategies, vertical non-permanent services. We're looking at Hattie's work on some of the work that we can do there, and then we are finally going to do some co-planning of lessons together, and then we're going to do some observing in the future. So this is the first of a few days coming up on that.
I love math.
Pick middle.
Yeah, like of all your options, yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
then
okay, I like that.
from there you can see.
Okay, so still like that.
Today was our first, what I'm calling portfolio days, which are kind of like mastery days. We spend the entire period looking at the learning goals that we've tackled over the last week or week and a half, and I guess in this case it's been 2 weeks since the start of the semester. And we have set up, today was kind of setting up that system and going through those learning goals and choosing which ones that we need to improve upon, and then starting on those tasks to show that improvement. I'm using a tool called FreshGrade from freshgrade.com. You should check it out. It's been a great tool. It's like an online portfolio tool. My students can take pictures of the work and upload them to those specific learning goals. I love that they can choose which learning goals to contribute to show the evidence, like new evidence of understanding or growth. So that is what we were doing today. We're gonna do that 1 day a week. Today we were working on our introduction to quadratic relations in the grade 10 class. And like I introduced linear relations, we do everything through patterning. So we have quadratic patterns. We put a real focus on how that pattern progresses from stage to stage visually. We use the visuals to build their equations and look at what stage 27 will look like. If we can draw stage 5, we can draw stage 10. If we can draw stage 10, we can draw stage 27. And generalize from there to stage N to create some equations. So you're seeing my students work on a particular quadratic pattern and coming up with the equation to match. So check that out. You know, I think many teachers think that every day has to be this grand activity, like a 3-act math activity or an exploration activity to learn our math through that way. And for me, balance is key. We could be doing activities like that, but we also have to be focusing on getting our students procedural fluent. We got to be getting those skills so that they are like second nature. Today for us in grade 9, yesterday we looked at exploring the Pythagorean theorem. Today we're practicing that Pythagorean theorem, and one way we did this better than just a worksheet is we used the appointment clock structure, where students were made appointments with each other. They had their own Pythagorean theorem question to kind of master, and then they would trade with each other to practice each other's Pythagorean theorem questions. So it was a great structure to get them up and moving, but also get some practice in building our procedural fluency on Pythagorean theorem. What you're seeing here in my classroom right now is our portfolio days, where we're spending time first doing a quiz on the week's learning goals, and then we'll be spending the rest of the class looking at those learning goals over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, and working to make improvements on those through our FreshGrade tool, which is where our portfolio is housed. Students get to choose which learning goal they want to work on, and there's activities set up in there to demonstrate, so they can demonstrate their understanding and improve upon the learning goals from the week. Today was a tough start in the grade 9 applied class. Like, the second part of the class went great and smoothly. The tough start was due to some behavioral issues in class, and I haven't had a lot of those issues in class the last couple of years, and I've always accounted for that with the way I've approached activities and lessons, and it's accounted for a lack of behavioral issues. Today wasn't that case. Today I had some kids that decided that they were going to be a disruption, and when I think back to how I could prevent it, I think right now I probably could have prevented it by getting into my activity faster. We were doing some talking at the board to start. We were recapping some of the Pythagorean theorem, and I couldn't get to that activity quick enough, and the students decided, these 2 students were going to decide to be a disruption. So I had to remove them from class, which I haven't had to do in a long time, and once I did that, the class went smoothly, but I definitely want to reflect some more on how I could have prevented that to happen in the future. So tough day today, but a good, strong finish. You're watching my grade 9 class. They are working with some data, and we're starting our scatterplots and analyzing scatterplots section of our course, and we need some data to analyze. So I'm a big fan of using manipulatives and hands-on learning and using real data. So they are building squares using cubes. I got this activity from Mary Bourassa. It's called Speedy Squares, but I've adapted it for grade 9. They are looking at the relationship between how many cubes they need to build a square of size 6 by 6, and then timing themselves on how fast they can do that, and that's going to generate a scatter plot for us. We're going to use that scatter plot to talk about trends, correlation, strong correlation, weak correlation, and then we're going to do some other practice problems with that. But we'll have time today to just build that scatter plot and then throw that into Desmos and try to use that to help estimate some bigger squares. The Desmos scatter plot activity, I think called scatter plot capture, is great. It's like game-based, and kids can earn points to predict where a scatter plot will be. And the great part is the conversation tools that we can use to bring out conversations about when, like what does that interval look like to get the most points, the least points? What do the scatter plots have to look like to get a lot of points and for us to be accurate? We had a great conversation today in class around that. I also wanted to touch on distractions in the classroom, like earphones in. I don't know about you, but kids with earphones in scream out to me that they're either one, not paying attention or listening, but the second is almost like a disrespect kind of thing. And not just to me, but to their classmates. A lot of times they'll want to have one earphone in and chat with each other about that conversation. And what you're telling your partner is that I'm not giving you my full attention. And for me and my class, we don't have earphones in all class because most of the time we are doing conversation and talking about our strategies. So I'm not sure about you, but for me, earphones out as soon as we start. What bugs me, I guess, is when kids are going to try to be sneaky about kind of slipping that earphone back in when they think a teacher is not looking. And in today, I had to have a conversation with a student who tried to slip one back in repeatedly. We had to talk about trust and what trusting each other, showing respect to each other, not just me, again, to the classmates. Reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook, share out what you're doing in the classroom to eliminate some of these distractions or to handle these situations. First thing we do on our assessment days is I hand back the quizzes from last time. And, this is a good time to talk about that mindset that they need to have, and especially in an applied level class, our students are very negative on themselves and sometimes each other in class. For example, I handed back the quizzes today, and some of them forgot some of those talks we had about growth, and that this whole process is about getting better, and we're going to reward that growth. They were making comments about being disappointed that they didn't get perfect on a quiz question. They were saying so someone might muddle themselves like they're so stupid, and we had to pause because there was a few of those, and we had to remind ourselves about growth, and that this quiz was a snapshot of their learning, and it's about what are we going to do next, and how we can get better. And so I want to reward that. When they get those quizzes back, they have feedback on them. If they're not perfect, their next steps on how to fix their work or how to change it so that they can get perfect. Their first order of business is to fix those up and then resubmit them. That's a mandatory. I don't want to have those quizzes go back and then them just stick them in the binders. It's all about making them better. And we're making that process visible for the students. I'm out of the classroom today. I'm working with some teachers on some co-planning, and I'm really excited about this lesson on ratios that we're working on. We're using these little square tiles, red and blue, and it'll be their first introduction to working with ratios and how we can show equivalence. We're set up some low floor, high ceiling tasks for the students to tackle while they're kind of making equivalent ratios out of rectangles. And we want to bring out this idea of stacking the ratios or stacking the tiles on top of each other to show some equivalence, like the heights will be the same. So we're pretty excited about that lesson coming up. We're going to go through the anticipation stage of what those students will do this afternoon. What I love about this activity is that we address what angle rotations are. What are we measuring when we are looking at angles and measurements of angles? I find that students have a hard time visualizing what they're measuring and what they're calculating when we just look at angle properties. This laser activity is a great intro to seeing those angles rotate. We have a great conversation about what we're measuring. We're measuring rotational measurements, not, say, linear measurements. What I love about this polygon activity, even though it has its roots in geometry and looking at the angles in polygons, I want to extend this to looking at patterning. And when we develop the rule of what did the sum of the angles on the interior angles of a polygon add to, we can generate that rule by looking at patterning. Like, what did the sum of the interior angles of a triangle add up to? Then a 4-sided shape, a 5-sided shape, a 6-sided shape. There is a pattern there. They are adding by 180 degrees every single time, and we can show the relationship of why that occurs, and then we can use patterning to develop that rule. I really love that about kind of mixing up the topics, like not teaching geometry in a silo. I want to extend that. We can bring in patterning and linear relations to talk about geometry. It's one of the best features of spiraling. It can also help us save time because now we're mixing two topics into one. We finished up the patterning work we started yesterday, linking linear relations, geometry, angles, different kinds of polygons and formulas, like what is the sum of the interior angles of an any-sided polygon. So we finished that up. But we did start today with a game I learned from Dan Finkel. He said it was a quick game. He called it, I can't remember, but I've been calling it from somebody else too, skunk, which is you roll 2 dice, everybody stands up, and you can always claim the points. That if you're standing, you claim the amount of points, and if you can sit to secure the amount of points, and every time they roll the dice, if you're standing, you get that amount of points, and then you can lose points. You lose all your points if the roller rolls a 1 at any time, and then that ends the round and you start a new round. And so the goal is to get as many points as you can. So kids are deciding when they should sit down. They're starting to think about what is the probability of rolling a 1 after using 2 dice, after so many rolls. So that was a fun start with my 20 boys and 4 girls in my class. So it was a great start to class, and then we finished with our patterning work. Back on day 18, a few teachers from my school and a few teachers from another school got together, and we co-planned a lesson on ratios. What you're seeing right now is that lesson carrying out in a grade 9 class. We came to observe a teacher delivering the lesson that we co-planned. We're in this process of lesson study. And now we're going to debrief after the lesson and talk about how we can improve upon it. We noticed there's some things that we need to improve on this lesson to keep the kids more engaged and get some deeper thinking out of that. Lesson study, check it out. On our portfolio days or growth days, one of the best things that I think I have done when I made the switch to do these kinds of days is to insist that students fix the quizzes and resubmit those quizzes on an ongoing basis. The goal is that every quiz that every student will do will eventually have a perfect answer on it. And I used to just hand back the quizzes and the students would look at the mark and put them in their binders and that would be it. But the fact that they fix the quizzes and spend time finding the right answers, not only they're fixing their mistakes and learning from those mistakes, but also they're knowing that the next time they do that quiz, they have that opportunity, but also the next time they do the quiz and that next learning goal comes up, they're going to do better on it. And that's one of our, we're rewarding growth. So it's mandatory our students are doing this, and I think it's worth the time investment. I don't know if you have the same experience, but coming back from a long break, like we just got back from our March break, a week off, and when you set foot into the buildings, there's 2 things. It's like, yeah, you're back to routine. You're excited to start the day, like a fresh, almost like a brand new start. And on the other hand, it's also like, I doesn't even feel like I had a vacation. Like that moment you step back in the building, you have that same sense of routine that it kind of washes away that vacation you just had. I had that feeling today, and maybe you have had too. Today we got back into it with our ratios, and we looked at the mullet ratio, which is a lesson designed by Matt Vaudry, which I've used year after year, and I love it for introducing ratios but also rates and doing some comparisons. So we looked at that today, had a fun first day back. You know, starting class and ending class are super important. One of the most important parts of the lesson or the class is how does it start, how does it end? And yesterday we ended, when we were talking about similar triangles in the grade 10 class, we ended in the middle of a note, like the timing didn't work out exactly, and we were kind of ending. We did some investigations on drawing triangles and measuring angles and seeing the similarities and looking at similar triangles. So we ended the note by formalizing some of the findings, and then we ran out of time. So instead of jumping into doing that right off the bat, as I said, I want that beginning of class to be great, a good start, and I also want it to be very curious. I decided to use a Desmos activity called water slides, which has students building water slides out of similar triangles, and students are, forced into creating these water slides that, if they do it right, the slide works. And if they don't create a similar triangle or three similar triangles, the water slide won't work. So through their exploration, they're practicing looking at proportionality in those similar triangles, which is an awesome way. And one of the great terms I heard the other day in a book called Dare to Lead, when you're thinking about learning, is how can we create desirable difficulty? Desirable difficulty meaning like, how can I make it difficult enough that the kids want to keep going? And so that was how we started class today, and it was a great start. And then we ended, after we did that, we finished the note we started the day before. So starting, endings, super important. One thing I think we have to remember is that not every day we're doing these 3-act tasks or big investigations and consolidating. There has to be some practice time. A lot of times I embed the practice time into the lesson after I do a curious type problem or a problem that sparks curiosity to get us going. Today we did one of Dan Meyer's NANA problems for ratios, and then we wanted to practice the learning that we did with those ratios, like looking for multipliers between ratios or within ratios. And one of those takes one of those practice structures that I use regularly to spice up repeated practice, like try to make it a little bit more purposeful than just doing a worksheet, is take the worksheet and use this game called a random winner game, which every time a student gets one correct answer, they get a sticky note that then they can place on a random number on a grid, like you're seeing behind me. At the end of class, I just choose a random number from the grid, and the winner, say, gets one of our JMSS math stickers to take home or to put on their calculator or to put on their binders. But I like to spice up the practice section. Don't forget about that. During our assessment and growth days, on top of us fixing up our quizzes and showing that growth, the students practice the skills that they've been working on. And one way they practice that is through KnowledgeHook.com or khmath.com. Knowledge Hook provides practice questions, and the nice thing about that is students can choose the different missions based on what skill they want to improve on, and then they can practice those questions. Like it gives me the information to say that they've consistently demonstrated the understanding of these skills so that I can say and feel confident about their abilities and give them an assessment on those skills. So I embed those Knowledge Hook questions into these days too. So our students are working on not only fixing up quizzes, doing a new quiz at the end of class, but working on the Knowledge Hook questions.
So if you divide, you'll find out how many they have as seconds, and you'll understand.
What are you doing with your calculator there?
I'm dividing by how many seconds there is, so I can find out how many clicks they get in a second, and then comparing them.
Is that one?
Yeah, bot 5.
So which one's faster?
Bot 5 is faster, because bot 5 gets 6.3 clicks in a second, and then bot 6 gets 5.7.
Remember, when you are working with tasks or teaching through tasks, one of the most important things, other than planning that task, is planning how the consolidation is going to go. Like, how are we going to tie it up? How are we going to connect it to previous knowledge to create new learning? One way that I did it with Dan Meyer's Super Bear task today is we went around the room and looked at the different strategies students were using to solve that problem. And I had predicted a couple to use a unit rate solution, some to use a table solution. We've been using number lines to solve ratios and to solve proportions regularly. So I anticipated some of those, and then we can tie up those into the 3 different ways we've been looking at solving problems in this one. So we consolidated today by coming back together, writing them out so we have a note at the end of class. And that's, that's a little different than just having that note at the beginning of class. So how are you consolidating your lessons? Here we are, day 30. Today was all about linear relations. It was our first formal day with the grade 9s on linear relations. And what I love about my first formal day is it's like a review, because we spent 7 warm-ups since the beginning of the year completing pattern problems, just asking one question for each of those pattern problems, like, look at this pattern. How many squares, how many circles, how many stars are on step 43? And all of those pattern problems were pulled from Fawn Wynn's visualpatterns.org website. Short warm-ups spaced out throughout the semester so far have allowed us to now just talk about terminology of linear relations and summarize some of the strategies we've been using in warm-ups all year long. It's a great day. It's a great way to intro linear relations, where it's not such a big idea all of a sudden, all at once. Just want to say thanks for watching all 30 days. Take care.